There seems to be a lot of debate about what exactly the Second Amendment means. The following video is my rebuttal to a video that has vastly gotten the history behind the Second Amendment wrong, while portraying it as fact.
Let us address the Second Amendment issue.
Well, it really shouldn't be an issue, but yes, let's go ahead and address it.
Everybody says, well, Cenk, no, I know we have one massacre after another, one shooting after another with guns and assault rifles and semi-automatics, but there's nothing we can do. Hey, have you read the Second Amendment? Well, great, I'm glad you asked that, because I have read it, and I'm pretty convinced you haven't.
And right off the bat, we have Cenk from the Young Turks basically saying that he's read the Second Amendment, and anybody who's an advocate for the Second Amendment has misinterpreted it. This should be good.
So let me show it to you. Quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You understand that the first part of the sentence is what you call a qualifier. Not, they could have just written the sentence, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, period, right?
Right here shows the exact misconception that he already has about the Second Amendment. He shows you what he portrays to be the Second Amendment. But where he got this, I have no idea, because this is not the correct version. Maybe this was from an earlier draft, but he clearly left out a comma. Knowing how the Young Turks seem to do their so-called reporting, I would say that they most likely did this intentionally to try to give people a misconception of what the Second Amendment is, what it means, and because of that, they can take you down this path of, oh wait, they didn't mean that everybody has the right to own a gun. But let's dive into this and let's show you what the real Second Amendment is. Now, I am showing my actual source that I used. Notice that Cenk failed to provide a source because he most likely left out a comma intentionally to give a misconception on what our founding fathers meant. Now, I could have used many different sources, including the Library of Congress. I chose to use Cornell because they also touch on the Supreme Court ruling from 2008 of D.C. versus Heller. Now, I have overlaid my source from Cornell over the fake quote that Cenk used. He also put his in quotes to make it seem as if it was directly taken from the Bill of Rights, but it obviously wasn't. When he reads this, he also reads it very fast to portray it as being a flowing sentence without a pause. That is not how it should be read. It should be read as intended, using a slight pause for the commas. So it should be read as follows. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. He also left out a comma before shall not be infringed. That is another point of emphasis. Shall not be infringed means exactly that. Any regulations that we have today are actually unconstitutional for what our founding fathers had in mind. Now, I for one see no harm in background checks. If you've committed a violent crime, you have then forfeited some of your rights, as you can no longer be trusted to not harm others and infringe upon the rights of others. But if you are a law-abiding citizen, then you absolutely should not have any of your rights infringed, especially the right to say what you want and the right to protect yourself and your family.
But they didn't write it that way. They put a qualifier in the beginning. They said, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, hence you get the arms.
Well, they didn't write it the way you're trying to portray it, as I've already pointed that out.
If you're using it as part of a well-regulated militia. Now, why is that? In their experience, they needed a well-regulated militia because oftentimes the troops weren't enough. They'd literally be fighting Indian nations, and the army couldn't do the job by itself, and they need the militia of that state. And they argued over and over again in the Federalist Papers, hey, listen, we need to train these militia better. They need to be a well-regulated militia so that when we go into conflict, they can help the army win the wars. Now, which part of these jackasses carrying semi-automatic weapons throughout the country are part of a well-regulated militia?
Now, I'm not sure what a semi-automatic weapon is, but I am assuming he means semi-automatic weapon. And these jackasses, as you put it, don't have to be part of a militia. That's already been pointed out as well. Part of the Second Amendment, after a comma, is the right of the people to keep and bear arms. People, meaning everybody.
And what are we doing? We're fighting the Cherokee? Is that what's happening here? And back then they had muskets. Thomas Jefferson didn't know you were going to use an Uzi on your neighbors.
So Thomas Jefferson didn't know you were going to use an Uzi on your neighbors. Okay, fair point. But let's see. What guns did Thomas Jefferson know about back in his day? Let me show you. Let me introduce to you the Puckle gun. This is a copy of an advertisement to sell the Puckle gun from 1718. I'll repeat, 1718. That is 73 years before the Second Amendment was put in place. In the advertisement, you can read, a defense, defending King George, your country and laws, to defending yourself and Protestant cause. It also says at the bottom, for bridges, breaches, lines, and passes, ships, boats, houses, and other places. Houses. So this gun was actually advertised to be put in a house. Let me explain a bit about how this gun works. The Puckle gun was a manually operated flintlock revolver. It was patented in 1718 by James Puckle. He was a British inventor, a lawyer, and a writer. The Puckle gun was one of the earliest weapons to be referred to as a machine gun, being called a machine gun in a 1722 shipping manifest. The way it operates does not match the modern use of the term machine gun, but the Puckle gun, by all intents and purposes, was a high-capacity, fast-shooting machine gun. Now, there's no record of the Puckle gun actually being used in combat or war. It seems as if production was very limited, and there may have been as few as only 2 guns manufactured. This is most likely because the cost to produce these guns was so high that most people could not afford one. But this one example destroys Chank's argument that Thomas Jefferson, or any other founding father for that matter, couldn't have imagined an Uzi. I don't know about you, but if I saw 2 people, one with an Uzi and the other with a Puckle gun, I'd be much more afraid of the Puckle gun. Here's another example. This is the Cookson volitional repeating flintlock. This gun could fire 12 rounds before needing to be reloaded. It's a lever action breech loading repeater. They also called it the Cookson gun. This gun dates back to the 17th century. There is a Cookson gun in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. It dates back to 1690. Now, if you do research, unlike Chank, who obviously did none, there are many examples of various guns used throughout history before the Second Amendment was put in place that showcase not only were our founding fathers able to conceive the idea of a gun more powerful that shot faster than a musket, they actually had those guns back then as well. Now, of course, today's guns are far more advanced, but our founding fathers were very well aware of the advancement of guns and where they could very well end up.
You're not fighting tyranny. What are all these people doing in all these shootings? They're shooting innocent civilians. You say, oh, not me. But I don't care if it's you or you give the guy, you give enough people in this country unlimited access to this kind of high weaponry, and what are they going to do? Yes, some mentally deranged people are going to abuse that.
Yes, unfortunately, some mentally deranged people have gotten their hands on guns. But even if laws were passed to outlaw all guns, the mentally deranged and criminals would still have their guns. What? You honestly think that criminals are going to hand over their guns because the law says so? They already don't follow those laws. Look at drugs. There has been a war on drugs since 1971. How's that going? Just because something is against the law does not mean that it is going to stop criminals. If you actually think that the laws would stop the criminals, then you're either very naive or mentally deranged yourself, Chank.
That's why you need regulation. It doesn't mean we take your guns away, but what it does mean is that we can be sane about this, that not everybody has the right to, it says right to bear arms. What, so that you could put an rocket-propelled grenade, an RPG on your shoulder, walk around, open carry, right to bear arms. What part of your ass is part of a well-regulated militia?
What part of your ass has gotten anything right about the Second Amendment? You've been wrong on everything so far. There are records of private ships being allowed by Congress to equip cannons to protect themselves. That's big artillery. It was protected. Congress allowed it. I would say that with the budget that the Young Turks have, they might actually do some research ahead of time and make sure that they got things correct. But it's pretty obvious that they're not worried about getting things correct because they're trying to pass a false narrative on what the Second Amendment is, what it stands for, and what the Founding Fathers actually meant.
This is nonsense. All right, look, to give you a better sense of it, this is what they said back in 1777 in the Journals of the Continental Congress. Resolved that this appointment be conferred on experienced and vigilant general officers who are acquainted with whatever relates to the general economy, maneuvers, and discipline of a well-regulated army. I give you that quote to give you a sense of what they meant by well-regulated. It meant a disciplined force that you could call upon when you need it, whether it's to fight the Indians, to fight a different government, etc. It was not Bob in Tennessee and Dave in Wisconsin or whatever, cleaning their Uzis in their basement.
Oh, you want to try to bring up quotes from the Founding Fathers, do you? Well, here, let me provide you with some quotes from the Founding Fathers that discussed exactly what it meant by the people. A free people ought not only be armed, but disciplined. George Washington. And that the said Constitution be never construed to authorize Congress to infringe the just liberty of the press or the rights of conscience, or to prevent the people of the United States, who are peaceable citizens, from keeping their own arms, or to raise standing armies, unless necessary for the defense of the United States, or of some one or more of them, or to prevent the people from petitioning in a peaceable and orderly manner the federal legislature for a redress of grievances, or to subject the people to unreasonable searches and seizures of their persons, papers, or possessions. George Washington. These next three quotes are from Thomas Jefferson. No free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. What country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance, let them take arms? These two quotes are from Benjamin Franklin. They that can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. This next quote is from Samuel Adams. And that the said Constitution be never construed to authorize Congress to infringe the just liberty of the press or the rights of conscience, or to prevent the people of the United States, who are peaceable citizens, from keeping their own arms, or to raise standing armies unless necessary for the defense of the United States, or of someone or more of them, or to prevent the people from petitioning in a peaceable and orderly manner the federal legislature for a redress of grievances, or to subject the people to unreasonable searches and seizures of their persons, papers, or possessions. Here's two quotes from George Mason. To disarm the people is the most effectual way to enslave them. I ask, who are the militia? They consist now of the whole people, except a few public officers. Here are two quotes from James Madison. Besides the advantage of being armed, which the Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation, the existence of subordinate governments to which the people are attached, and by which the militia officers are appointed, forms a barrier against the enterprises of ambition more insurmountable than any which a simple government of any form can admit of. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia, composed of the body of the people trained to arms, is the best and most natural defense of a free country. And notice in his statement, he has the right of the people, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, is before anything speaking of a militia. I have three final quotes. Then I'm going to go back to Thomas Jefferson. He was very much a proponent of the right of the people to bear arms. And so I believe in his statements, he possibly made some of the most powerful statements that any of the founding fathers could have made. A strong body makes the mind strong as to the species of exercise. I advise the gun. While this gives moderate exercise to the body, it gives boldness, enterprise, and independence to the mind. Games played with the ball and others of that nature are too violent for the body and stamp no character on the mind. Let your gun, therefore, be your constant companion of your walks. So he is pretty much saying when you go on a walk, take your gun with you. The Constitution of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be at all times armed. So right there, Thomas Jefferson specifically says it's the right of the people by themselves to bear arms. And this final quote from Thomas Jefferson, I think, is by far the most powerful and truly speaks to exactly what our founding fathers intended in the Second Amendment, and that they meant all people have the right to bear arms. The laws that forbid the carrying of arms are laws of such a nature. They disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They serve rather to encourage than to prevent homicides. For an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man. Now, Thomas Jefferson was reading this from a quote from an 18th century criminologist. But it shows that he felt so strongly about this that he not only studied history himself, but he felt that this quote would really showcase the power that they needed to make sure the people had over the government. And part of the reason that I feel that this is possibly one of the strongest comments our founding fathers could make is because this speaks to exactly what those of us that advocate for having guns for personal protection are saying. We're saying that if we have guns, we're better equipped to stop other people that might have a gun to use against us. Right here shows Thomas Jefferson felt the exact same way. So I'm not sure how people like Cenk can sit here and say that they've read the Second Amendment and they know what it means and you don't. Well, with all these quotes I've given, and I used a lot just to show none of them could be taken out of context because there's so many of them. But this final quote truly shows Thomas Jefferson was making this exact same argument that a lot of us are making today. You can argue what you think the Second Amendment means, but you can't argue with the quotes of the founding fathers. They said themselves, the people shall not be disarmed.
Here's another one in context. This is from George Washington back in 1889 to give you a sense of what that word means. If your present numbers should be insufficient for that purpose, I would then by all means advise your making up the deficiency out of the best regulated militia that can be got, referring to help in fighting off the Indians. Go get your best regulated militia, not Bob. This doesn't have anything to do with you protecting yourself against an intruder. This doesn't have anything to do with your unlimited right to carry nuclear arms or whatever thing you want to do. They had a specific purpose for this amendment. What happened? I thought you guys were all about strict constructionists. Whatever's in the plain language. Let me give you the plain language once again, because you're apparently completely and utterly ignoring it. Quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. You ignore the first part because it is convenient for you, because you want to have your guns, the gun manufacturers want to sell more guns, the NRA wants to make more money and buy more politicians. You are not part of a well-regulated militia. This is nonsense. You do not have an unlimited right to keep and bear arms.
I let Cenk finish up with the quotes he used to show just how out of context he is portraying the founding fathers' comments. I provided so many more, and not only did I provide more, I displayed them on screen along with where the quotes were taken from and the dates those statements were made. This just shows how bad Cenk is lying to try and fool people into thinking that the Second Amendment means anything other than it is the right of the people, all the people, to bear arms. The Founding Fathers were very intentional, and they knew exactly what they wanted for the Second Amendment. You don't have to be part of a militia, so yes, Bob does have the right to have his own gun. He also makes the comment about whatever is in the plain language and again shows his altered version of the Second Amendment. I have presented irrefutable evidence of what our founding fathers meant. And again, I'm displaying the true Second Amendment on the screen for everybody. People like Cenk are completely wrong. As I said, you can attempt to argue what you think the Second Amendment means, but you cannot argue the words of our founding fathers. So, Cenk, let me give you the plain language again, because it is you that is completely and utterly ignoring it. A well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. Now, I emphasize the commas just to show how wrong Cenk is in his reading and interpretation. So, Cenk, it is not the pro-Second Amendment advocates that are ignoring the first part. It is you that is ignoring the true meaning. You fail to do real research like I have. I spent a lot of time doing actual research to prove what people like you are grossly misinterpreting what the Second Amendment means and what our founding fathers intended. And it's really sad that I have zero budget and I'm able to do this research. You guys have a multi-million-dollar budget. So, as I've stated, you're either intentionally leaving this stuff out or you just don't know how to research. Either way, it's wrong. So, yes, Cenk, you do have an unlimited right, as I have clearly presented in my video. What is nonsense is you claiming to be a news channel when you either fail to do research on purpose or are ignoring it. And even though I stated you have an unlimited right, I do believe there's certain situations where you lose those rights. Like you're a violent criminal, you commit murder or assault or, anything violent in nature. At that point, you can show that you cannot be trusted. So, unfortunately, you made those choices and you forfeit your rights when you do so. Now, this video is much longer than I intended. The video I used for my rebuttal was less than 5 minutes, and I am currently about the 25-minute mark. Now, I thought about editing this down, but I decided not to because I feel so strongly about our history and our constitutional republic that I felt it was of the utmost importance to include everything. Now, I could have included even more quotes and historical facts to back up what I am saying, but I feel that I provided more than sufficient evidence of the true meaning of the Second Amendment. Now, I'm going to show some footage of the guns I mentioned earlier that were around in the days of the Second Amendment. These clips were taken from a great channel, Forgotten Weapons. I will leave a link in the description. Check them out. They have some really good content if you're interested in historical weaponry. Now, for those of you who may not know who the Young Turks are or who Cenk is, I felt that it was important to give a brief background. Cenk was born in Turkey and migrated to the United States. This is important to note because he named his channel after the Young Turks. They were a group from Turkey that committed mass genocide against the Armenian people. And guess what happened before the genocide? The Armenians were mostly disarmed. And remember that last quote that I used of Thomas Jefferson? The laws that forbid the carrying of arms are laws of such a nature they disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They serve rather to encourage than to prevent homicides, for an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man. I believe that what the Young Turks did to the Armenians clearly proved the point that Thomas Jefferson made in this quote. And somebody like Cenk, that came from a country that committed genocide and took away from the people the weapons that they could have used to defend themselves, it kind of scares me when you have somebody like Cenk advocating so much to disarm the American people. Now, I'm not saying that he has any other agendas other than he's just naive and scared. But still, deep down, it worries me that somebody that came from a country that committed mass genocide and named his own channel after the group of people that committed that genocide is now advocating for the same disarmament of the people. And again, I think Thomas Jefferson had another good quote that kind of fits with this. I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. Now, I plan on uploading regular content about the history of our great country as well as current events. This is my first video, so I apologize if it's a bit rough and raw. I don't have a fancy microphone. I don't have the multi-million-dollar budget of the Young Turks. I'm just one person in a room in my house recording a video on topics that I feel strongly about. If you would like to keep up with my take on history and our current events, subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know what you think about my video. And unlike a lot of YouTubers, I'm not going to regulate or delete any comments. There very well could be some vulgar language used because there's going to be a lot of people that completely disagree with what I have to say. Although, like I previously mentioned, you can't really argue the words and the quotes from our founding fathers. But anyway, I digress. But I'm such an advocate for our free speech rights as I am for the right to bear arms. This is the internet. Read at your own discretion. And if something bothers you, guess what? It's easy to make it go away. Just click on a different link and don't read it. Thank you for watching my long video. In the future, I will try to make my video shorter, hopefully to around 10 to 15 minutes mark. I just felt that for this video, especially with what's going on right now, I really wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything out and that I was able to truly show light on what our founding fathers meant. I believe I've done that. Like I said, if you disagree, leave a comment. This is my first video, so there's probably going to be a very limited amount of people that see it. I'll read every comment, and if I feel so inclined, I'll reply back. Even if you disagree with me, I don't mind having a debate or discussion as long as it's civil, as long as it can remain that way. I think that healthy debates are an essential part of our country and our history. Our founding fathers even debated some of these things when they made our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. I hope you'll tune in again for my future content. If not, hopefully you at least were able to learn a little bit about our nation's history and the Second Amendment in this video.